I'm gonna plug this back. We're coming to you live from Woodland Hill Camera and Telescope.
Oh, look at
it's Dr. D.
Your host today. Cool, man. Lighting looks good. Hey, do I have power on?
You know you're live, right?
Okay,
Yep.
we're not a dealer.
We're not a dealer, what? That's okay. That way everybody sees what actually goes on in here. I just want to see that I got power on here. Oh, yeah, we do.
All right, you're on your own.
Bye-bye. Yeah, how do you know who's watching, Simon? They have a comment section? Give me a
The
second.
chat is on the left-hand side of the screen, or the right-hand side. You'll see the text coming down.
You talking about the guy on the left?
Yeah.
The guy on the right?
You're live, you know that.
I realize that. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm just setting up this little scope setup that we have here. We're just going to connect up here to Safari. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing, what we have here. Ding, ding. Cool. So all I've done here is we set up a Takahashi FC100DF. There's a few different models. There's a DF, there's the DC, which is the F9, the DF and the the DL is the F9. The DF and the DC are F7.4s. So I've set up a DF here for you guys to see. And I have it coupled to a Tema EM11 mount, Tema 2Z. This is the latest mount from Takahashi. And maybe it's a perspective from where I am, but this scope is very tiny. It's very small. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, tell you a little bit about this mount, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about observing so that you guys have an idea here. Kurt's mowing along here. Well, you know, that's okay because, you know, then you guys get to see what really goes on here and how busy we are and how crazy this gets.
Got a quarter?
So
I'm sorry? Got a quarter?
I'll tell you some of the criticism
Parking out there? Yeah.
this mount gets.
Parking in the back, too.
I'll tell you some of the positives. There's positives and negatives
That's all right.
with it. So probably the negative for the EM11 mount itself is that it slews pretty slow, which is true, which you're going to see. In fact, to do a meridian flip on this mount, using the go-to would probably take you about 3 or 4 minutes to actually do a meridian flip. So you wouldn't do that. But there's a workaround that. And that is, and I apologize, I have a bad throat today. Hey, Simon, excuse me. Hey, Simon, can you look at one thing on the computer here when you have a sec? Simon Tang's having a cup of tea right now. Hey, Simon, what is that little thing on the right there? Not now, turn on, turn off. Will that prevent anything going in? Or?
Nope.
Simon sets up all the lighting and the videos and everything. You want to say hi, Simon? You want to, like, put your head in there?
It is in there.
Is it? I don't see you.
Yeah, it's right there. There's my eye.
Oh, yeah, just so. Is anybody watching?
Is anybody watching you? Of course they're watching.
How do you tell? Where's the show?
Why does it matter? Start talking.
I'm just talking to myself.
You do that all the time.
That's true. So this is my favorite 4-inch refractor setup in the world. That's no joke. I'm dead serious about that. The technology in the EM11 is actually quite old, and that is why it has received some criticism. Maybe you need to get him a skill saw. It's old technology. Takahashi was here recently, and we're talking about the idea of doing a maybe they could add USB inputs or something for you guys for this mount. But nevertheless, the reason that I like it is because the technology is very primitive, and therefore it is super reliable. In fact, I have Tema systems that are probably, I don't know, in the neighborhood of 15 years old. The 200s, EM11. I have a personal collection of them, which I really use and love. And the thing I like about it is Takahashi went back to the old school hand controllers. You see here, this is the latest version of it. On the Tema 2 EM11, they had a controller similar to this one, and then they went to a really smaller one that had really tiny dials on it, and that's the one I have. A little harder to use in the dark. It's hard to feel the buttons. So I found myself having to put these little sticky things like that, get the lighting there, on each little knob so I can feel it in the dark. So it feels more like what this does. So this is really the kind of back to the traditional hand controller that was the original, which I actually like better. So it's an improvement in that regard. You can adjust the RA or deck to reverse the motion if you like. Now, this is a very primitive type of handset. There's no technology in it. But that's what's great about it. That's why it's so reliable. So instead of you having one of these computerized handsets that you constantly have to update, or it's got a bug in it or something you have to worry about, you simply hook it up to Safari, which I have connected via the SkyWire. I like using the SkyWire. It's very reliable. It doesn't disconnect. On some of the Temas, I've noticed that when I use the Wi-Fi, sometimes I got a runaway drive. And we don't really know why that is. I talked to Safari about it. I've spoken to Takahashi about it. Nobody seems to really know, myself included. So we can't really get to the bottom of what causes that. But nevertheless, I have the mount comes with the serial cable, which I have here. So the serial end of the cable that comes with the mount plugs into the serial end of the SkyWire. Then the other end of the SkyWire attaches to the phone. And this is how I've always used this mount. And it keeps it reliable. You don't have to punch in date and time or anything like that. And what I do is I just go into Safari and
Everything's on there.
yeah, I probably need to turn this off and on because hold on a second here. Let me get this here. I'm going to fire up the Safari. And I'm doing like a fake alignment here. And I'm going to tell the Safari that I'm pointed at Polaris. So I'm just going to punch in Polaris in here. I'm spelling it out. And then I search it, which I'm doing right now. And what I'm doing here is I select Polaris, and I can center it, and then I can hit align. So it prompts you to hit align. Boom. Now you don't normally want to use Polaris to align. I'm just doing it because it's convenient in the position of the scope, and all I want to do is just kind of walk you through the features of it. But we're just pretending that the scope is pointed at Polaris. And I can go to, Alioth and Ursa Major and hit go to. Now the scope is actually going to a star in Ursa Major, and you can see it moves very slowly. And the way this isn't the kind of mount you want to have if, say, you're doing meridian flips and stuff. And I've had this discussion with people that buy it. You don't want to be doing meridian flips with this mount. It's not good for that. It's easier to just turn it off, loosen the clutches, flip it over to the other side, and then realign. But there's a method of observation called constellation mopping. And that is where which is what I do. That's primarily the only way I observe. And that is where you sit in one or two constellations and you mop the objects that are in there and spend time with it. And I think a lot of the problems people have just in general with telescopes, selecting telescopes or observation, whatever it is, it all boils down to the skill of the observer. Sounds like kind of corny, but it's really true. Because no matter how advanced a telescope is, no matter how much technology you have, if you're not familiar with the sky to some extent or what you're looking at, it's hard to appreciate it. And I found that the more you take, time you take to read or research objects that you see, the more interesting they become. Even subtle things become very interesting. And I think that's kind of what's kept me out of astrophotography. Whereas I know Simon, he loves to do astrophotography. And I dabbled in this astrophotography, but it requires a lot of work, time, dedication, and for me, it's a little bit more of a disconnect. So I'm not going to try to, tell you that it's my favorite thing to do. I'm sure I won't like me saying that. But whatever, So, scope's position on Alioth, this is a star. And as long as you're searching for objects somewhere in the field, in that area, the go-to isn't going to bother you that much. But like I say, if you're kind of a beginner and you're like, you want to go to the Messier Marathon, do the Messier Marathon, you're slowing from one part of the sky or another, then, you'll want a faster mount, maybe an Altaz mount or a different type of go-to setup. The reason I love this is because it is super reliable. And I am not exaggerating when I tell you that. Knock on wood, but I never have problems. I've been to numerous star parties where I set these mounts up and I just never have problems with them. The cool thing about the 4-inch, the DF, is that the optic is up here. So the idea behind that is it's 4 inches of aperture in this thing. The tube's only 95 millimeters. This tube ring, clam ring, it's the same clam ring that's used to hold the Sky 90, which I have as well. And the SC, the DC model, the DL, and the DFs all, even the DL, there's a longer clam ring for the DL that goes out about much, but this one, in my opinion, works fine. I've used it with the DL and it was fine. We had a customer that just bought a DL today, and I asked him if he wanted to have this ring instead, but he preferred to have the long one. I said, that's fine, whatever, if you want that. What you see here is ADM Astro's quick release bracket. I have a 6x30 finder on here. The focus is achieved on the back here, so you can just rotate this little thing for the focus. There's a draw tube extension here, so if you want to have that or not, you can do so. There's a vast array of accessories you can get for this scope. And best way I suggest to learn about this is I have a systems chart, which I'm holding up here, which I printed out. It's in the manual, the user's manual that comes with the telescope, but there's 3 different ones they have that you could choose from that have different configurations. And these charts are these are a lifesaver because, you might even visually or photographically, and you're like, which adapters do I need? So these spreadsheets have all the various adapters you need if you're using a CCD camera or whatever. Now, the draw tube, this is your standard 2.7, the draw on this thing. This is actually the same tube, and visual back adapter is used on the FS128, which is the model prior. The FS28s came out, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. I've lost track, but it's been out for a while. And it's the same size, even though the tube looks so tiny. The DC is a little smaller. And, some people, there's an adapter you can get for the DC model that converts it to 2-inch if you wish to. But one of the things people forget, and you could go to Google Astronomy Tools CCD calculator, and they have field of view calculators there, and you can punch in the focal length, about 740 millimeters in this case, and aperture or whatever, and you can pull up a particular eyepiece, and you can see what the fields of view will look like with relative to various objects. So, some objects are large, like M31's very wide, large object. M3, it's like a glob. It's going to look smaller in the scale. So what you want to see, that's what helps. You have to decide what eyepiece you want to use to look at whatever the object is. So, and this here, I have the Talk Prism here. I love the Talk Prism. I got a couple of them myself. And some people are not keen on them because the housing is made out of like a nylon hard plastic, which I don't care. I think it actually is a very nice one. I have a Zeiss Butter Mark IV Binoviewer, and it has a plastic housing. Can you believe that? From Zeiss? And that thing must be, I don't know, 35 years old? I don't know. Maybe 40? I don't know. So here's the Talk Prism. It has a compression ring in here inside. And some eyepieces, kind of an annoying thing. When you drop them in there, you have these little compression rings. Not compression rings, but a bevel inside there. So when you drop it in there, the compression ring itself tends to get wrapped around the bevel itself. And as a result, you have to rotate this thing more times to get the eyepiece out. After a while, when you're trying to switch out eyepieces at night, it's kind of annoying. So what I recommend is what's called a parafocaling ring. Vader makes them, we sell them. I don't know, they're 25 bucks. And you put a parafocaling ring around the top of the eyepiece, all your eyepieces, and when you drop it in, it just stays. It doesn't at a certain height. So it never, compression ring never falls into the bevel. And so that's why in some of the videos, you'll see I have one of these, a parafocaling ring around the eyepieces. So I highly recommend this prism. It's only about just under $150 for the Takahashi prism. And if you use like a nice high quality 24 millimeter wide field, you can get a really nice chunk of the sky. And that's plenty good. So you don't necessarily have to have a 2-inch diagonal with the scope. You can have a lot of fun with it. Something else I was going to tell you guys about are the is a focuser. Now there's no fine focus on here. I personally like the stock focuser. Everybody online has their opinion. Some people want to put a starlight focuser, feather touch. Some people put moonlights on them. A couple of mine have them, but I still have the original focusers attached. They're just little things that you retrofit. Focusers you retrofit to the back. But Takahashi offers what's called the MEF3. Some people call it an afterthought because Takahashi made it to add on later. Now, some of their scopes actually come with it included already. But I'm just going to show it to you. This is the focuser. There's a little bracket. You remove the knob. You can put it on this side or the opposite side, whichever you prefer. You're left-handed, right-handed, whatever. And you just attach it in place. So you have like a ultra fine. It's like a 10-to-1 or 8-to-1 or something like that. It gives you a smooth focus with it. And then there's coarse on there. So my sales associate friend is cracking jokes at me right now. They like to do that to me. I always get beat up here at work. So these are highly recommended if you wish. You have to get the right tension on them for them to work properly. You got to get the right amount of tension on them. And once you get them set right, they work quite well, and I actually like it. So this is something you can add on later if you wish. So I brought a couple of books. I think you're looking for somebody. See, this is what happens when you're in the middle of a video, but people need help. It's okay.
Can you still help me, or
I can't? But one of the.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah, I think. Hey, Kurt, this lady just has a question. Could you help her for a sec? There you go. That's all right. So the mount is tracking right now. If I choose, I can go to a different object here. It reconnects itself, it reestablishes itself. And, you know, I'll just choose another star here to go to. Now, the Tema EM200 and the EM11 are really different as far as the speed of the mount. The EM200 is really fast by comparison. It sounds different. These little things that you see here are the encoders. You have auto guide port here. You have, you know, your PC cable, which is the one I'm using right now for the Safari. Whatever program, you can do Stellarium if you want. I like Safari. I think it's just fun to use. Something I wanted to tell you about observation. This is important so that you guys know this.
How are you doing today?
You got to have a companion. One of the companions I recommend that I use that we actually carry is called Night Sky Observer's Guide, NSOG for short. And this is what it looks like. That's it. This is a super popular book. It was written by some really advanced observers named Keppel and Sander. And it's neat. After Burnham's Celestial Handbook, which is, you know, kind of phased out, it's still popular today, though. During this time, this is around the 60s and 70s.
You have something.
I've got a 1.4.
People use this book for like scopes up to 12 inches. But as bigger apertures became more common, they had a new guide that had fainter objects in it. So this has a pretty extensive library of objects. But what's neat about them, and some people have their opinion, but my opinion is that the everything's arranged by constellation. So what I normally do is to select one constellation and mop all the objects in that constellation with the mount, with something like this. And it's just a lot more fun for me. I think at first when you're starting out, you want to look at the messier objects or some of the bright objects. That's cool, and I get it. But it's just more, I mean, once you get past all that, you want to go to the next level. And that's where you're like, what do I do with a small scope? Because they're always pushing, even in this book, they push aperture. You know, it's like the thing. Take care, Yagi-san. Catch you later, brother. Yep. You know, there's a lot of controversy about, oh, there's not enough aperture here and stuff, but that's a big mistake if you think that. That to me illustrates the lack of knowledge a person has about the sky. There are many things that look better in wide field, which is what this does, than they do in some huge light bucket. There's a lot of things in the night sky that don't look good in big light buckets or SCTs. You know, a Schmidt-Cassegrain gives you a field of view the size of a postage stamp, but there's a thing called perspectives. And perspectives are, it's important to understand it. And the way you understand it is to get a book like this. It's written by Craig Cross, and it's called Binocular Astronomy. And you're probably like, why are you showing me all these ancient books and stuff like that? So everybody's into all the, you know, technology, which I'm cool with it, and I use it. But it has, you have to put things in their place so they're not, they don't take over. And I think that's what happens. People don't teach themselves enough about the night sky, and so as a result, they don't understand what to look at. You can have a computerized telescope that has all the advanced features that you want. If you don't take time to read about those objects, to understand them, then how do you appreciate them? You know, you just look at them for their face value, in which case some of them are very dim and underwhelming. But I don't see it that way. I think some of the simple things that are very subtle, like even the colors of stars, you appreciate that, you know? And that appreciation comes from reading about them and trying to understand more about them. I think just makes the universe more fascinating. So this book here teaches you about what looks good in rich field scopes. And this is the version 1, first edition by Craig Crossan, who's just a wonderful writer and a great guy that I've spoken to on a good number of occasions over the years. And Craig Crossan is just a master observer and writer. Just beautiful. I cannot say enough about this book. I think you can get them online for about $20 or probably $10. You know, who knows? But this book really helped me understand and appreciate what scopes like these do, particularly on double stars. There's a thread on Cloudy Nights I wrote called "Put Your Stars on a Diet," and the whole idea about that was to Google it, put your stars on a diet, and to help people understand how do small scopes behave on stars, and you'll learn more about that if you read that thread. Put Your Stars on a Diet. That's what it's called. Another great book which I brought. These are my own personal books. I brought these in so people would understand. Is Sky Vistas by Craig Crossan. Same author. Very similar to Binocular Astronomy. The only problem with this book is that it's very expensive. This copy is about $100, and sadly, it looks like a bootleg Xerox cheap copy I got, offline.
What's that?
For $100, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And what happened is the pages started falling out, so I had to bind the book in a folder to prevent it from, falling apart. So I had to fix that book. But the purpose of this book is to help you appreciate what scopes like these do. That's why I'm mentioning these books to you. They teach you about how to observe the Milky Way and a lot of DSOs as well. My favorite book of all time is Burnham's Celestial Handbook, which I showed you before. This comes in 3 volumes, and I use it this very day. And the reason is if you choose a constellation, there's a list of double stars. And that's kind of what it looks like. Yeah, you take the Dawes limit. Dawes limit is named after an astronomer, and it's a formula. It's 4.56 divided by whatever your aperture is. So if you divide 4.56 by, say, 20-inch scope, you're going to be able to resolve finer stars. But in reality, it's not often what happens. So, I just suggest, looking at stars that are about 2-3 arc seconds. Arc seconds are something you learn about when you read a book like this. They tell you what arc seconds are, so you can appreciate them and understand what they are. So what I'll do is I'll go through these tables, and I'll just mark down some of the ones that are within the magnitude and the separation that the telescope is capable of resolving. There's a guy named Olcott, astronomer, wrote he's an amateur astronomer, and wrote a book called Adventures in Starland with a 3-inch telescope. And it's a beautiful book. I think it was written in 1914 or something like that. It's expensive. It's a very small book, but what it does is it talks about double stars. Double stars are a fun thing to do. I spend a lot of time. My friends tease me. They say, you're looking at dots all night. I'm like, yeah, I'm looking at dots, but I know what those dots are. I appreciate what they are. That's particularly in a scope like this. How does the scope, compare to modern scopes? If you go on Cloudy Nights, it's obviously the most, largest forum in the world. I think they have like 1 million followers. They probably have over 100,000 members. But I think it has over 1 million followers. So it's pretty huge in our industry. And there's a lot of talk about different class, and it's this new trend of class. Everybody talks about class and Strel ratios and wavefronts and stuff. I try not to get too bogged down by that, and because any ED scope that's made today, any scope, pretty much any ED triplet or doublet that is sold on the market today, where no matter where it's made, actually perform pretty good. And they have good color correction for what they are. It's not like where people focus on one thing and they're like, they get real focused on it and they lose sight of what's practical. I don't think people are practical sometimes, but I try to be practical, especially after using and testing and comparing so many refractors, which I've done. A lot of these scopes that I've sold, I've actually evaluated for customers, either out of request or I ask them, hey, I'd like to have a look through this thing before shipping it to you, just to have a look, you know. And these scopes are really consistently excellent scopes. You know, I've never seen one that I, like, you know, was dissatisfied with. Quality control is excellent. Mechanics are really nice. You know, I've added the 6x30 finder, which I mentioned here. The finder's not really a big deal. The quick release just allows you to take it on and off. But if you want to store it, just take the, you know, get the quick release, add that, pull that off, and you can put it in a case the size of a, you know, like a tripod case, you know, soft case, you know. It's very portable. This is a 2-element design. It uses a fluoride objective lens, and there's not a lot of companies, in fact, I can think of that even use fluoride anymore. But nevertheless, you know, regardless of all that, they just have good color correction. I'll just tell you that. I don't want to get too carried away with glass, you know. I'll be contradicting myself. They really do perform well. And like I said, the objective, you know, the cell is up here, so that by the time the light traverses through here, it fits into this little, you know, tube. And it's so small for a 4-inch. It's astonishing how small this is. And I've compared it side by side with my FS 102. And honestly, I can't really see any difference. It's just very hard to distinguish any difference. As far as the DL, some people are like, what do you think of the DL? The DL is excellent too. I would just say that for the majority of things that you look at, there's really not much difference, to be honest with you. It's only when you're like really high magnifications on double stars, we're using, you know, short focal length eyepieces, that you might see some trifling color in this thing. It's very subtle at best, you know, so I wouldn't, you know, subtle at the worst, sorry. And it's really not an issue. So I wouldn't get too overly concerned about it. As far as eyepieces, Hawk has a new series. They're called the TOE series, which I have here. They also have Abiorthos. It's like a 6mm. These kind of eyepieces are great for viewing double stars or objects that are small. You know, you can use conventional plossels, like television plossels work nice. Talk has their own plossels. Those are good. And I personally use small eyepieces to keep the weight down, you know, on a system like this. But I really love this system. It's, in my opinion, it is my favorite 4-inch setup in the world. I mean, without a doubt. This mount with this tube is my favorite setup on the planet. So, and that doesn't mean you can't enjoy other ones. We have Skywatcher, there's Stellar View, Astrotech, Explore Scientific, several brands, and they're all pretty doggone good, you know. But this is kind of like that thing, remove all doubt factor, you know. You get one of these, just remove all doubt, you know. The other thing that's nice is there's the Mulan series, the 180, which couples to this one beautifully if you want. There's a little dev plate. The little Mulan 180 has a Vixen rail. There's a little saddle you attach to this, and you can mount a 180 on it. So if you want to gather a little bit more light, you can use it. That's a Dal Kirkham Cassegrain called the Mulan series. I have a video on the 250. I need to do some videos on the 180 and the 210, and maybe at some point 300. But those are nice. The thing with the refractor is just reliable images. Also, the colors of stars will almost always appear more accurately, you know, your perception of whatever color is, because we all see color slightly different. Some people see stars slightly different color than others. But whatever your perception of color is, it's going to be emphasized more so in a smaller aperture. The more the aperture increases, the more washed out the stars tend to be. The colors are harder to distinguish. And the reason that happens is because as the aperture increases, the resolving power increases. And the trade-off is that what they call the airy disk in the star gets tinier and tinier and tinier. And what happens is you get Bill P on Cloudy Nights uses this really cool term called woolly stars, which I really love. And it's where you see in a big reflector, you look at stars and you see all this scintillating. Now, what you can do to understand that is go to Google and punch in Damian Peach's Pickering scale. Pickering is another person. Most of the terms are named after people. The Pickering scale is a fascinating scale, and if you Google that, what happens is you see the stars scintillating from a level from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. And the larger your aperture gets, the more scintillating you get. There's a trade-off. So to view double stars, which I do a lot of city observing, and I'll tell you something about that that's interesting in just a moment. But typically, the size of your area disk increases when you decrease your aperture. So if I take a aperture stop and mask it down to a 50 millimeter 2-inch opening, and I look at, say, a bright star like Arcturus, Bodes, I'm going to see an area disk. You're going to see like a pinball. It's amazing. And you're going to see less scintillating. As soon as you open the aperture, the more you open the aperture, the more the scintillating starts to take effect. So it's this delicate trade-off between having, there's some cases where I don't even want too much aperture. I prefer to have less. And that's hard to believe, for telescopes, but it really depends on what you're doing.
I want you to show them to me.
So,
that you've seen so often, every time you walk
don't worry
out.
about they're yakking in the background there.
We did, we went through, I don't think we ordered more than 12, did we?
But that's typically what happens. And then another thing that's interesting is city observing. I have an observatory in the city, and people are like, what? Why would you have an observatory in the city? Part of that is because you can have a lot of fun viewing in the city if you know what you're doing. The problem is most people that view in the city are just looking at the messier objects. And if you limit yourself to just that, then you're going to be disappointed, because the messier objects, the vast majority of them respond more to dark skies and large aperture. But it depends. There's the Colander catalog, there's the Trumpler catalog. There's tons of catalogs. And once you familiarize yourself with those catalogs, you start to appreciate what different instruments do. I think it's unfortunate, when people get these kind of scopes and they just stick a camera in them and that's all they do with them, and they think, oh, they're not good for anything else but shooting images, and that's unfortunate because they're missing out. And I tell people, I bring it up, the North American Nebula in Cygnus, you can see it with a UHC filter. In that particular case, you do need a 2-inch eyepiece with this and a UHC filter. But you can see the whole North American complex, the Central America area. It looks like a photograph. It is amazing. And you can't see that in a big scope. You could see it with filters in a pair of binoculars. I used to have a pair of Adler Blicks by Carton Optics of Japan, which is a 7x50, and I had a pair of UHCs that I plugged into the eye cups, and I would look at went to Baja, Mexico, and I could see the North American complex. It was astonishing. So, Colander 70. If you've never seen Colander 70, it's so beautiful. If you look at the belt of Orion, Mintaka, Alnilam, and Alnitak, you go to Alnilam, Colander 70 looks like a braided necklace. Gorgeous. It looks good in binoculars, or it looks good in a rich field scope like this, but you should see that. I think, the more you get familiarized with the sky, the more you will appreciate what these scopes do, as I mentioned before, And I think that, that's the important part of observation. When the scope gets in the way, if you're having problems with it, or it's unreliable and you're tinkering all night. I've been to so many star parties. It's sad. So many phone calls that we get are just, putting out fires, dealing with technical problem that somebody's having with a telescope mount. Yeah, is this thing expensive? You're dang right, it's expensive. It's not cheap. It's about a $3,300 mount. So I realize that. But on the same note, it's reliable. I mean, it frickin' works, man. And once you polar line it, You do a 1-star alignment with Safari. It's amazing. It nails all the objects in there, and it tracks really beautiful, and it's a great imaging mount. If you go to Nick Reisinger's website, he did what's called the photopic sky survey, where he took a few Zeiss lenses on each side of this particular mount, and he shot the whole Milky Way, went all around the world to do that, and it's amazing. It's called the Photopic Sky Survey, and I recommend it. Simon is peeking in there. Simon, you're having your tea. So, yeah, and the neat thing with an equatorial mount like this is you can, like I said, you can put a Muon on here. You can switch the tubes around. You'll notice I have the clam ring here, and reason I recommend the clam ring over a dual ring, like a double ring, is because if you have to slide the tube forward or backwards, this thing works a lot easier. So you level the tube at an angle and then loosen the knob here and slide it forward or back, whatever. It's easier to do that. If you have a double ring, it's harder to do that. So it usually kind of gets snagged in there. So I always mention to people, if you're going to buy one of these scopes and you want to image with it, you may not want this ring because it's kind of limited on how you can piggyback stuff compared to a dual ring. But if you're doing visual, which is what I do, go with the clam ring. I mean, it's no ifs, ands, buts, what's about it. It's just the way to go. You can mount a 7x50 finder they have available for it. There's nothing to this mount. It's got azimuth control here for your polar alignment. You got your altitude adjustment here for most latitudes here, and these are the encoders right here. And I would say the only downside pretty much to this mount is the speed of the go tube. But like I said, if you're like me, where you set up a workstation, you have a table and you're viewing, and you just take your time, and you'll have so much more fun. It's not like everybody's like racing. Technology almost becomes an ending in itself. We don't even talk about observation. We're just talking about the equipment, and I love the equipment, but I don't let it control me, man. I got a old C8 from 1973, and it's got nothing on it. No computers, nothing. It's got a right angle finder and a tail rad. Tail rad's been around forever, and I can have a lot of fun just star hopping all night. And but I think sometimes people get too caught up in all too much into the technology. Technology sometimes becomes an ending in itself because you can't separate it, So I don't know. I have more of a philosophical approach to astronomy, and I've been doing it for 25 years. I've looked through so many scopes, tested so many things. And the thing, nothing just beats having experience to it. You go on the internet, you want to learn, you got to, research things and find out what you can. But in the end, like I said earlier, most of the ED scopes that are sold are quite nice as far as color correction. What really matters to me is how well is the optic figured. The talks are consistently well figured. They just do a good job, figuring the optics, the quality, the build quality. Everything's solid. It's very. They don't exaggerate the weight claims either. So it's cool in that regard. How much time we have? We got a couple of minutes. We keep these in stock. We have the M11s in stock. We have the FC100DFs in stock. This one has the slightly larger focuser compared to the DC, like I said, so they have an optional field flattener you can get, reducer, corrector, so forth.
Okay, let me call you off to work, yeah? All right, bye.
Work with. So that's nice if you want. But most of the people that get this scope are into viewing visually. So if you're torn between this and a DL, yeah, it's not that much different, You'll get just an ever so slightly flatter field in the longer scope. It's so subtle. It's not really an issue. So check out our website at
What
telescopes.net
about
and check out the EM11s. And I have the metal tripod here that I set up here. I have the old green color on here. It's a little bit different in color. They've gone to a kind of a blue. You can have touch-up paint. Krylon. It's called Celery.
Introductory to DSL.
It's another one they were talking about online.
It's not on the
Called
online manual,
Fusion.
it's in the one
Matte
that's in
vintage
there.
blue for the new talk
I
color.
don't know
But
anything about it. You want
it's a little too light. I experimented with it.
Good luck.
You get any kind of mark or anything like that,
Right.
you can always touch it up. I got touch-up paint. Takahashi touch-up paint. Can you believe that? It's a dab of blue on there. It matches the new talk blue. And I like that because it's kind of a fleck kind of finish, so it's easy to work on these things, you know. Check them out. And super, super reliable. That's the key. Reliability. That's what I'm all about. So I want to be out there fussing around, having problems with with the mount or the scope or anything like that. I've been seeing so many situations, the more technology you have, the more susceptible things are to go wrong, but in some cases you do need the technology. It's necessary, a necessary evil. Yeah. So, all right.
Right. Okay.
We'll be back again soon.
So you're basically missing.
And Simon's going to turn off the computer.
Okay, I would have to get in touch with the guys from
Bye, guys.
Italy to get a copy of the manual. Where are you located?
Turn it off.
Say again? Yeah, where are you located?
Oh, okay. Okay. Did you order this from us?